Okay, so this is assignment 2, our dashboard. We go to File, New File, Shiny Web App. We name it Assignment 2R. Create. So we have two tabs here, the user interface and the server. The user interface is more like the page layout of what the output within R is going to look like, and the server is more where you input your data and you can tweak the data and specify different things, which will make more sense once we put some stuff in there. So for the user interface, I'm just going to go ahead and use what I already have, that code that's already pasted, and put that in there. So I'll go ahead and go through this real quick. So library is just pulling from the library within R and just using this Shiny package. All of the information from fluid page down to this closing parentheses is being pushed into UI, the user interface, just what you can kind of manipulate within the graph, which will make more sense once it's pulled up. And I've actually gone ahead and just pulled the graph up so it makes a little bit more sense as I'm going through this. So the sidebar layout is talking about this sidebar right here, just the information that you can input, kind of select different options that will manipulate this graph. So the page with sidebar means that this will be on top of the page versus to the side of it. And then your select input, you're just choosing what these boxes are going to mean. So this first one, the input ID, this is going to be the type of smoothing method that you're going to use. The smoothing methods reduce the variation or random effect like within your data. It just kind of makes the graph more interpretable or readable. It helps you to see a pattern, which again we'll be able to see once we go through this again. So that's what smoothing methods are. So the label equals choose your method of fitline smoothing is just naming this, putting the title up here. Choices equals list. So this drop down menu is what we're naming right here. So we're saying that we want a list of none equals none, LM equals LM, and Loesch equals Loesch. And then whenever you click none, you're going to get none. Whenever you click LM, you're going to get LM. And then this select equals none, that's the first thing that's selected whenever this graph shows up. That's your first choice right there. Automatically that shows up. But we do have a condition, so an exception. So when this happens, we want something different to happen. So the conditional panel for this, we're defining what our condition is. So we have our smoothing methods, our three different types up here, but we're saying that whenever the input method and the exclamation point means, don't include this. So whenever we have none and the other smoothing method, LM, whenever we have these two things, we don't want something to happen. And what we don't want to happen is the slider input. So if you go to Loesch, which wasn't defined, you see that there's a slider input bar that you can, change. But we're saying that we don't want that to happen for none and LM, so excluding it. However, for the one that we do want it, which is Loesch, again, the label is just the label for this slider bar is set the honest smoothing that you want to see for this graph. We're just continuing to define, what this slider bar is going to tell us. So the minimum value is going to be 0.3, which we can see here. The maximum value is going to be 0.9, which you can see here. The value is 0.3, that's just what it's going to default to automatically when you open up this chart. And then the step is 0.05, so our little, increments are dashes there. So then we go into select input again, so just what we want to title something and what are we going to input. So we want to do a title for this graph. So we're saying that we want to have a title. We're going to name this title, which is where the label comes in, and for this, it's call it what you want to call it. But you also have the option of changing the title. So we're giving you choices. So we have another drop-down list, and so we have a list of choices. So you can have, your title here for whatever your information is. And again, it's similar or the same as, here. We want the first part to equal the second part. So your title here gets you, your title here, and the title for this graph is BMI, which changes it for that over there. And then the main panel is just, our graph in general. Our plot output and our output ID, we want a scatter plot. This is just saying that, whatever you give us, put this all into a scatter plot graph, which we can see that we have right here. And the width and height are just defined by 900 to 400 pixels to make it, that size. So now we're going to go over into the the server side, and, pull in our data, which really probably should have been the very first thing that we did, but I already had everything else copied and pasted. So I'm going to go to browse. Let's search for athlete. Okay, there it is. Select it. Open. Okay, there it is. And import. Okay, so we can see that it's right here. I'm just going to go over here real quick and type in view. Okay, so that pops up there. Okay, so going back to the server, I'm just going to delete this because I don't want that to keep going. Okay, so again, we're pulling from the library Shiny. We're attaching the dataset athlete, which again, here's my dataset. I'm just renaming it because, why not? Data is a little bit easier to type than athlete. So I'm pushing, the dataset athlete, renaming it into data. We are going to the library and pulling up the ggplot, which you have to download. That basically just makes your graphs a lot prettier. It gives you a little bit more sophisticated graphs you can use. So we're pushing all of this information again into the server, which is this that pops up within R, and we're defining that the function of the server is all the input and output, all the things that we're going to put in, all this, and then what we're going to get out of it. So our output we want is a scatter plot, so that's where we're defining output, $scatter. But this data is being pushed into, the scatter plot. So what do we want the scatter plot to look like, basically? So again, we're going to plot something, so we're going to say ggplot to do this more sophisticated thing. Data to pull from, the data set, which is the athlete data set. AES just describes how the following variables are going to be defined. So we're going to have an X and a Y axis. My X axis is going to be height, and my Y axis is going to be weight. And these plus signs just mean, and. All these things are defining what this ggplot is. So we get down to the geom point in size 3, so that's just, what are the size dots that are going to show up on my plot. We're going to do our X and Y limits. So XLim, because it's height, I went from 150 to 2, I looked at my graph to see, what the minimum and maximum values were, and just kind of went off that. So made the graph a little bit more readable. And the same with the YLM. I looked at the data and I chose 40 and 115 for the weight. So here we go with the title, GG title, and what is that going to be? So input, we're going to create some kind of title text, and then we're going to do the smoothing method again, which I've already kind of talked about. But again, it's just making what's coming out of this graph, making the plots, and looking at the visuals of it more understandable and helping you see a pattern more clearly. So we're just saying that again, I'm going to have a smoothing method, and that method is going to be smooth method with a confidence interval of 0.8. And then the span is just a simple function for constructing HTML docs. So this is telling it to, put this information into an HTML doc, which we can, again, see over here, the server that pops up. So this na.rm, it basically says that missing values are going to be silently removed. They're not going to pop up with warnings every time. Say, oh, look what all these things that you have missing. So that just basically turns that function on. So then, and we're doing all this stuff again to define what our graph or plot is going to look like. So the theme of it. So my axis text X, X-axis, and we're saying that for the X-axis, we want the text of that to be 15. Same thing with Y. We want the axis text of, you know, what part of that text to be a 15. The title, we want that to be 30. And the title for Y, we want that to be 30. So again, if we go over here, we can see that the actual x-axis, these are 15, while the x-axis title is 30. Same with this. The y-axis, these increments are 15, while the x-axis title y is actually 30. And then we have this last line, which is the plot title. The element text is that we're choosing the size of this, and we're having that a size 60. We're saying that we want it to be bolded and that it's height adjusted at 1. So now that we have everything running, I'm just going to, actually I'll leave that there. I'm going to stop this. So to stop the Shiny app from running, I'm going to go to Run App. It's going to ask if I want to save my changes, save all the changes that I've made, and here it pulls up this. So this is a interface within R. It's not actually on the internet, but it's kind of showing you the browser sort of setting, so what you could do with that. So here we can again kind of play with these options, which I've already kind of showed you. So there's the smoothing line for LM. Here's the smoothing line for Loesch. Where you can play with this slider bar and the line gets straighter and straighter, kind of, to see more of a pattern. And you can change that title. And that's it for this assignment.